Hey, you are. Hey, what's going on, fellas?
How's it going?
Oh, it's
Pretty
going
good.
all right, man.
Cool. So we're here to talk about Macross Plus, the OVAs and the movies. But first thing I want to do is see. I've seen this a long, long time ago, and I just recently now just rewatched it. Both actually, but the first thing I ever saw was the OVAs. Let's talk about that because that seems to be an interesting topic. Overall, did you like it? Did you like it? You might have liked it before. Did you like it again upon rewatching it?
I loved it again.
Okay. Okay. All right. How about
Well,
you, Meyer? How about you, Jason?
I actually had the opposite experience first time around back in the '90s. I watched the movie before the OVAs, and I
Hmm.
didn't get around to watching the OVAs until like years later when manga put them on DVD.
Hmm.
So, but I'm watching them again. It's like it's like I loved this series back in the day. It's like the movie was I thought it was absolutely incredible, and it was interesting like seeing like how they re-edited everything like for the movie after watching the OVAs. Watching it, actually watched it the movie a couple of years ago to show it to a friend with the intention of like, oh man, this is so great, you gotta watch it. And well, it did not go down as expected. In fact, it's like I think that there's a lot to like about this, but there's also a lot of stuff that if you think about it hard enough, then it's like it kind of starts to fall apart a bit, and that bugged me because it's kind of like I'm watching this as I'm watching these OVAs again. I'm thinking like, man, I want to get back to to like like how much I felt about this series back in the day, and even though there's so much I liked about it, like I just couldn't quite get there.
No. So that's pretty good stuff. I remember watching it a long time ago in OVA form. And then later on I rewatched it, and I mean way later on. And I remember going like, yeah, this thing still holds up. But I had not seen the movie until a lot later because it wasn't my first thing. In fact, I had ordered the manga DVDs when they were available. In fact, my yeah, this is how old I am, guys, but that's all right. My Amazon history, we talked about this, Jason, like still shows my purchase history for these DVDs from manga, the OVAs, and I was like, oh man, that's pretty cool. But I do remember watching it on videotape, VHS. Anyone?
That's how I got my copy of the movie.
Yeah.
And
So
that
it
and
was
that was
like,
the last time I watched them.
yeah. So watching them in remastered, I mean, it's just gorgeous. First of all, I mean, movie or OVA edition, this is just classic artwork, right? I mean, this is classic anime. And it really just looks good. And by the way, there are some CG things. There's a little early CG stuff in there, but that doesn't really bother me that much. I don't know about you guys.
I think they use the CG sparingly here. They did it whenever they did it, like they're just it was coming by like a I guess you could say like a shift in reality or in perspective. But actually, I think I want to see. Here's I think we're getting ahead of ourselves here because like, we're talking about like all our feelings about this. We haven't actually said what the series is about or how it even
Oh,
ties into to the Macross canon.
well, let me put some of the perspective into here. So tying into the Macross canon, it is 30 years. Well, actually, it's a little bit over 30 years since I don't remember the exact year. But the one of the events that's celebrated in this movie is the signing of the armistice between basically the peace between the Zentradi and the humans. Okay, so that's one of the landmarks that they're celebrating in this movie. Um, so this has taken place on one of the first planets that were colonized called Eden.
New Eden.
Um, that New Eden.
Oh,
Thank
boy,
you.
was it Planet? Was it Planet
Is it?
Eden?
I think it's Planet
Planet
Eden.
Eden.
Actually,
Yeah.
I was willing to go with your New Eden thing. That sounded pretty good to me. But I think it's New Edwards that we get it confused with because
Yes.
that is the name of the base where we meet our at least two of our major characters here. We got Gold, who is a He is. Then he's not 100% Zentradi. He's at least half Zentradi. We don't know because they don't. In the dialogue, I never picked up on this. There's him, and then there is also Isamu, and and then there is our third person because there always has to be a third person, and it's Myung. Um, so, and this is not really it's not really a love triangle. Which
You
is
think it's a
something that
love
we
triangle,
also
but it's something much weirder as things and much more awkward as things go on.
the one thing that we do find out is that these three individuals, while they meet and while you do see them in the beginning, they have a history. They all three of them were raised on the planet Eden, so they actually kind of grew up together, and they didn't actually. I don't even know like the youngest pictures that they showed. I don't remember if they showed them as kids or something. I think they did, didn't they?
That's actually something from the movie. I think it's one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
That-
Yeah. So we get this impression that they had this long history. They've known each other for a long time.
Yeah, they were friends at one point, but then something happened to drive them apart. And all we know is that Isamu and Myung they split the planet like 7 years ago, and Gold stayed behind for whatever reason, and Isamu's back because like he's fighting for we're introduced to him fighting rogue Zentradi in space for UN Spacey. And even though he's really good at it, he's really cocky and arrogant about it.
He's a cocky, arrogant pilot.
Mhm.
And he can't hear you over the sound of how awesome he is either. That's his summary right there. And rather than just like ship him off to some sort of ass assignment, they decided to send him. We're going to make you a test pilot instead, because like they can use someone like with your kind of recklessness.
Yep. Now, the parts you're explaining here are not in the movie. This is
Correct.
all backstory that's only in the OVA, which is fine. And it was in order to watch the OVA and the movies, I had to kind of separate out that, which wasn't too difficult, I found out. But yeah, it's just kind of they give us a little bit more backstory in the OVA.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's like, and with Myung though, she's basically well, we were told that she used to be like a singer, like she was like their school, like Golden and Isamu's like school idol. It's like found that she's not singing anymore. She's working as a producer for Sharon Apple, the hottest virtual idol in the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
And she's come to Planet Eden to help set up Sharon's next concert there. And well, it's like most of the OVAs just kind of focus on like the drama like that ensues between them, because Gold and Isamu are fighting for rival parties in order to get the I think UN Spacey's next fighter pilot commission. It's like Isamu's flying the traditional YF-19 model, while Gold is doing like this fancy new YF-21 that's got like a direct brain interface where he can control
Neural interface.
Yeah, he can control it using his mind. And well, that makes like he's got like he shows he's got real skill with that. But as we find out early on, it's like, well, he's been harboring some real bad feelings towards Isamu. It's like because early on when he encounters him during one of the test flights, well, it's like he just freaks out, and then like the interface disconnects. And well, it's like, well, someone who does rescue him grudgingly, it's like Gold thinks about wanting, like, say if I just generated some downward force right here, this would cause him to spin out, and that's exactly what happens. So it's like, yeah, it's like there's there's bad blood here, and then there's like what these guys have against each other,
which is an interesting thing altogether because when you think about, if you're going to test something like a neural interface and you have somebody that has, the other test pilot you're going to bring in is literally this guy's childhood friend that it's like, and whether it was known or not that Gold had problems. And actually that does come up later, but that might not be the best thing. I don't know. If you're picking somebody like that, and it's kind of one of those things. If I overthink and I think Macross Plus has this. If you just start thinking a little bit, if you start coloring a little bit outside the lines and asking why, and you go like, that doesn't make any sense. But like I said before, they actually do address a little bit of it in this plot. But it's not directly related to Isamu and Gold's relationship, but they know it pretty much off the top, either in both interpretations, either the OVA or the movie version here, that there is some bad blood there, and that's the bottom line.
Yeah, it's like, and it's like, hey, Myron. It's like you've been kind of quiet so far. It's like, got any thoughts on the series as it is?
No, yeah, I mean, I really did enjoy this. I mean, it's been since high school since I watched this series, and I watched the OVA today actually, and the movie earlier this week. And as I was watching the OVA, I was starting to feel like I was leaning more towards this one because I really did like how it opened up a little bit more details on their background and history. So like even seeing Isamu, as you mentioned, fighting off Rogue Zentradi in the beginning, we didn't get to see that in the movie. So it was really interesting to kind of see that recklessness in play before he brings this to the air station. I really did enjoy the kind of like, I guess you can call it kind of typical, but I did see a love triangle with these three characters, even though Isamu didn't necessarily like I guess flaunt his emotions as passionately as Gold did. It felt to me, the character felt like he was holding back and holding back, a secret, which obviously we get that revelation in the end of the movie, near the end of the movie, or episode 4 of the OVA, if you will. But I really did enjoy. I really love the animation quality for what was this 1994.
Yeah,
really, really great animation quality, and honestly, the YF-19 is probably like one of my favorite Valkyries in the series. So to see that Valkyrie in action, and in the crystal clean quality of this remaster, it was a treat to watch. But I really did love the soundtrack to this too. It was different, and aside from the soundtrack, I mean, it was different that this wasn't about a war or anything. Like we had a rogue killer AI as kind of the main antagonist of this series, and this killer AI
she's a pop idol who has feelings.
She's a pop idol who has feelings, but her music was so dope, and the music kind of brought me back to that style of the 90s. It kind of had that like pop R&B sound that you would hear within the 90s when it came to like the instrumentals and the beats. I really loved it, and it was just a different kind of story. And at the end, it was almost as if the killer AI's emotions that ended up trying to take over humanity and destroy the world, it was brought about by Myung and Myung's feelings for Isamu, her true feelings for Isamu. But I feel that eruption of emotion came to burst because of what happened with that incident 7 years ago. And so once we finally learned what that incident was, it's kind of like, oh, like this secret, like basically tore this long time friendship apart. So I did like that aspect of this Macross story.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So you like that? What else did you guys like about the story overall?
Man, it's like, you go first, Myron.
Like aside from this, the love triangle, I really did enjoy that kind of like that rivalry between Isamu and Gold. Obviously, both of them have this passion for flying, but it always felt like Isamu's passion for flying was always stronger. Like I got the feeling of that a little bit more in the movie than I did the OVA. I mean, it always felt like this guy's head was in the clouds, and both of them were always trying to one up each other. It was almost that hardcore Goku and Vegeta type rivalry that gets in the way of what should be really important, which is, not only their friend, but it's getting in the way of the project. I know both of these guys want to they want the project really, really passionately and hardcore, but because of their rivalry, they almost destroyed each other, thus almost destroying both of their chances on obtaining this project. Which, in essence, it ends up happening when the UN Spacey ends up going with the what was the name of that red ship, that project? Do you guys remember?
Oh, the Ghost.
Thank you, the Ghost. They end up going with an AI piloted ship instead, and so I don't know if that was the ultimate plan of the UN Spacey, or if it's because of their incidents that had happened, on these flight tests that ended up leading to the decision we're better off having a pilotless ship because we don't have to worry about emotions, we don't have to worry about casualties. And I thought that was kind of like a deeper kind of storyline, with these characters so driven by their goals that they're willing to, at least one of them is willing to do anything to make sure that this happens. But Gold's desire and his passion is to also not only obtain this mission, but also to protect Myung no matter the cost. And he feels like he has to protect Myung from Isamu because I'm not sure if it's because his memories were so clouded and he suppressed that memory of what actually happened and blamed Isamu for it, or if there was just that blankness and he didn't know what happened, so he just assumed Isamu did it because he ran away and called him a coward. And so I really kind of liked that, gray aspect of the movie, or the OVA too, not knowing what happened until the very end when he thought he killed his best friend.
So that's pretty good stuff. And Jason, what did you like the best about, like,
I appreciated I appreciated how the characters were really well drawn to the extent like I can understand like how they would feel about like what they do. It kind of makes sense within their personalities, even though there's some stuff in there that's like, oh man, it's like it's like that's really hard to explain. And I kind of don't want to get into it because it's really like morally questionable.
well, I mean, like,
but I guess,
stuff.
but the other good parts, like I just say, like is the animation, because my God, this.
Mhm.
I mean, like, I mentioned like when we talked about Zero that sure, like the CG stuff like may look dated, but I think like the way the composition still holds up, and it still makes a case for it as being like quality spectacle. But I think, but Plus does not have that problem. This look like it's as sickly animated today as it was back. It's like back in '94. I mean, it's like just like the overall. I like the character designs. It's like I like the animation, and my God, the flight scenes. I mean, like that stuff in the first OVA is great. I mean, just when like you're seeing Isamu like take out those rogues and Zentradi. I mean, that's just kind of like just gets you right, like gets your attention like right from the get go. And then there's like that the test flight sequence with YF-21, and that's just like, and that's also really handled really well as well. It's like and like the way it incorporates CG, like when Gold is using to spot the like the missile's flight path and fly right through them. I mean, wow, it's like seamless. Well, not seamless, but it's like it's really well integrated into the actual animation.
I like your earlier comment. Sparingly, it was good. It's like they knew because I know that I've seen like mid and early like 90s CG, and it was not really ready for prime time. So I appreciated the use that they had, and sparingly is a great way to describe it.
And I think that's a good. That's a good example, because that sparing use just it just enhanced the overall aesthetic of the film. Because let's face it, like the Japanese like when it comes to 2D animation, like the Japanese are king, in my opinion. Very clean lines, detailed animation, and characters, and the way they draw mechs is like phenomenal. And the use of CG in Macross Plus, like one of my favorite scenes was the fold animation with the YF-19 like flying through the fold. Like that was like a beautiful scene right there. Just kind of give you that illusion of like, warping through space.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say, in my opinion, like what I liked, I agree with both of you guys. I think that the animation is top notch, and I would expect no less. Well, wait until Macross 7. But um, it's high quality. It's really good looking stuff. As for the rest of it, the one thing that kind of I liked, was the relationship between these three people. Um, and it's not entirely clear. However, at the end, it's it appears that and I didn't see the love try. I kind of saw it there, but it's not as strong as like, okay, well, we're gonna both be fighting over the same girl, kind of a thing. Not quite, not in this case.
Mm-mm.
But it felt a little bit more like, hey, we've been friends. Yeah, there was this, there's that, but there was a part where where when Gold's like, we always said that we would protect her, and it was like, yeah, you know what, and that was, and that is actually kind of this kind of a pinnacle of like Gold's character arc in this, right? And I really like that. I was like, you know what, that's the way friends should be, right?
Yeah,
Self-sacrificial.
but
When
Yeah,
he
except like
understands what he is like, he understood what it was, and it was like, oh, okay, yeah, he's like, that's what we'll do,
now what how I
yeah,
how I picked this up to be a love triangle was that when Gold when Gold realizes what he did, and we have that flashback where Isamu and Myung were in the living room, and Gold ended up punching Isamu and almost tearing Myung apart. Like I when Gold was older, he ended up confessing like how he wanted to be with her and spend his life with her, and it just made me feel, and it just gave me that perception that, okay, so when they were younger, yeah, they were all friends, but Isamu and Myung started developing like a closer relationship, like a loving relationship, and Gold had those feelings, but Myung didn't reciprocate it to him the way she reciprocated to Isamu, and he got jealous and just raged out. And in order to protect his feelings, or protect him, they both kept it a secret as he blocked it out and never really told him. Because I remember him bringing it up too, that, oh, you guys always known you just wanted to spare my feelings, and spare me the shame, but you guys always known. He was like, and Isamu like brushed it off like, known what, just to wipe it away from the past. So that's where, like, I think that's what I enjoyed most about this story is, like, I mean, it didn't blatantly tell you, but that's the interpretation my imagination gathered from these bits and pieces of information scattered through the OVA or in the movie as well.
yeah, it's like I think I can that's I think that's a valid interpretation. In fact, I think that's kind of how I thought about it through most like after watching it like initially back in the day. But then you think about, well, why would it's like, but it's kind of like they just kind of, I mean, they kind of kept it a secret for him, but it's also kind of like they're also not discussing it themselves in the present day. I mean, to see like
Hmm.
like this Gold who like doesn't remember anything about this, and they're just kind of thinking. I don't know. I felt that that's something that should have been
it's
addressed between
it's a
like Isamu
conspiracy.
and
Myung.
yeah,
And young, it's a
Hmm.
conspiracy of two, if you think about it.
yeah.
And
The thing is, though,
that's what hit me like kind of hard. I was like, oh man, like I can understand like just one being one, and this is the reason why it's kind of offset for me. It's because of that whole like, hey, we said this, and then he believes this. Let's just just leave it as it is. And there's an implication that Gold takes the medicine to suppress, like he suppresses this memory with the
Mm-hmm.
medicine, and he
And his
literally
like his Entrati side as well.
right, he suppresses it. I mean, and this is, by the way, this is the one thing that when is it Colonel Millard, when he,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
when they come back with his blood test, he's like, hey, yeah, we saw that he's using this drug, and he just shreds the report.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, whatever,
Keep it
like I
between
don't
us.
care.
Millard's kind
But
of an interesting character because you get the feeling that he's kind of like what he sound what it would be like if like he's someone who actually grew up into a command position.
oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Because like
exactly what I thought.
yeah, because like when he's like when like someone like shows up like in the briefing in the first episode, I mean Millard's not like angry at this guy. I mean he's just kind of like this is amusing. It's like, and especially when like he tells him like don't keep daring and recklessness in the same pocket. And he's like, yeah, you know what you got in your pocket? Stupidity. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and then when like someone punches like this nameplate, like he cut back to Millard saying he's so transparent.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the movie, there's this extra scene between him and Lucy back in New Edwards where he says like, yeah, I used to take ships out all the time on joyrides, and the upper brass would be covering my ass the whole time. It's like I guess it's
Mm-hmm.
my turn to do the covering now. Now that's it's an interesting comparison because if he's talking about just taking planes out on joyrides compared to what what Isamu is doing, well, that's yeah, that like I said, that's kind of quite a comparison.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting hearing working a lot with people in the military, working with them, and then hearing stories from Navy guys and Marine guys, and it's like about their COs and stuff like that, and it's like, yeah, well, we all went through that phase, and some of them still stayed in that phase. So to me it was kind of um like when I saw Colonel Millard and like him talking about those things even before I saw the movie and that extra line you're talking about, I was like, this feels like he's just speaking from experience, and he's just like
Mm-hmm.
he's just putting him in his place because he knows this guy, and if Soji Kawamori, like he did a lot of research at like according to the documentary at Edwards Air Force Base. He did some of that, and him being a plane nut, he's probably a military nut too, and he probably looked at that as well, like some of the anecdotes and things that happen in command structures, and it's like, yeah, sometimes the guy that you grab the rope, you grab the lone wolf guy who's the nut because he's the most willing person to go out there and take the risks, you
Right.
know.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is kind of, that's a very military thing, as far as I know. Now, I've never been in the military. It's like I've only heard these stories, but it feels consistent at least. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Millard is definitely an interesting character, and I liked his character in this. I thought it was cool. Lucy is just kind of the she's just a love interest. Love interest.
And see,
She's just kind of like there to
She's
like add
she's
some kind of
she's a plaything. Let's just face it, guys. Like,
yeah.
and here's my opinion of Isamu. Isamu is and they definitely paint this picture of him. He's a risk taker.
yeah.
He does not care, but the risks for him, the benefits outweigh the risks of anything. That's why he'll fly the way he did, and it's kind of it's like when
It's
he
why
first
he'll
takes.
commit a gigantic act of terrorism for the sake of his own ego.
Yep. So I see a contrast between Gold and him, and
Mm-hmm.
it's on purpose. Gold is controlled, almost too controlled, and we do find out that the drug has something to do with that. But he's almost too rigid, too disciplined. Too much of a straight ass. And then the other guy is Isamu is just like, well, I'll do it the way I want to do it. The test controllers when he's flying the YF-19 is like, stick to the plan. And he's like,
Mm-hmm.
but I did enjoy, and I think it's interesting because when they're fighting on the range the first time, like they and they're fighting in the range, the city, where where they're battling out, and then all the teams are basically rooting. They're like
Yeah.
cheering on because they
Mhm.
got the satellite zoom on them and they're watching all this. It's kind of it's just interesting to watch. And I remember seeing that scene way back in the day, going like, "This is nuts. This is great stuff, man." Like, you know, um, and because I remember, like the Macross TV series, Robotech, whatever it was, and then watching Do You Remember Love? And you're like, okay, well, the enemy's clearly that, but what's going on here? And they made some really good I think the conflict is well defined here, at the very least.
Hmm.
Mhm.
However, not the only big bad. The big bad really tends to be a combination of a combination of things, right? The big bad here is really Sharon Apple with the AI chip in her,
Hmm.
and that's the real problem right there. So,
She's Mung's desires made manifest.
yep, exactly.
Yeah, and
And oh, by
it's
the way, that's an interesting analysis as well. And I mean, like, I'm not just like I saw that, but then it's also described in the dialogue, right? Like Sharon's like, I'm just giving him what he wants.
Yep.
Mhm.
Which goes back to that risk taker you were talking about. Like, what he wants is that feeling between life and death.
Mhm.
That kind of like split second, which I thought was an interesting illustration between the OVA and the movie. And and
yes.
I, and I'm torn between which I like better because you know the OVA, obviously, each episode's about 40 minutes or so there's a lot more detail to flesh out. But there's certain things in the movie that I deeply appreciated. So specifically, like when Sharon Apple said, I want to give Isamu what he wants. When he's flying around the Macross, like he's resisting her song and resisting her temptation. But when the screen goes into that kind of CG esque like picture of the clouds and he's flying and she's saying faster, faster, higher, higher, like that's his desire is to
You get
fly.
what he's talking about,
You
and
get
also, and
yes.
and also the movie illustrated this well in another new scene when he's like talking with Lucy on the dock, and he's go flying around with his hand,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of like, okay, it's basically his id on autopilot right there. But then he also just that's when he talks about, like, what he wants to see, like, that split second between life and death.
And see, we don't get those details in the OVA, so it's like, like the end sequence of Macross Plus, I love in the movie over the OVA. Not specifically that scene per se, but I mean, there's like it's the little details and the little things that were added in the movie during those end sequences that I enjoyed more in the movie versus the OVA. And to your point too, Jason, like that, I think Sharon even says this to Myung, like, are you worried about finding out that he loves flying more than you? And you kind of get that sense a little bit more during those sequences, just how addictive flying is to him.
Hmm. And I think that's one of the things, like, I think I enjoyed the movie more than the OVAs. I mean, like, because of these additional sequences, I do think they do, like, flesh things out a bit, especially at the end, because that bit with Isamu, it's like, and Sharon, like, that helps. I mean, like, I mean, the ending to the OVA does feel kind of abrupt. Like, they were just like pressed for time, and we gotta wrap this up now. But
Hmm.
then they actually managed to give, like, some, like, kind of poignancy to it's like to what to, like, his son was like little, quest for, like, like what he wants to see. But then also he's got Myung's song to bring back down into reality. And it's also done in a way that actually makes sense in reality, because we see his cockpit mic being tuned to pick up Myung's voice, which we didn't
Hmm.
get that in the like in the OVAs. But best of all, though, is the few extra seconds we get of Gold fighting against the Ghost,
Oh
because
my goodness, that was
that
crazy.
that's something like that's if it's not like the most incredible mecha flight sequence I've seen in anime, it is really damn close.
Hmm.
So
Because I mean,
here's
they just
that
like
is
yeah
that
they
is an
just
incredible battle. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, they just did a good job of, like, conveying like the stress that he was under. It's like just like not. It's not just like, oh, he's gonna fly really fast. No, you see like the G forces like pushes like hands into his stomach. You see it's like his eye burst because of the G's. You see, and then it's like the stress is conveyed, and it's also set to this like to this like mournful tune like from Yoko Kanno, who did the soundtrack, and it's just everything comes together there. It's like you feel like everything that Gold sacrifices right here in order to find a way to try and defeat the ghost. It
Mm-hmm.
is amazing, and when I was all like I said, mentioned my issues with like things so far. Like while I'm watching the ending, like to like last 20 minutes of like the movie, it's like none of that even registers. I'm just like locked. I was just locked in, just like seeing how everything came together. And
So
I guess to be honest, like for the ending sequence of the movie, it's like I did manage to get back to like this is what I liked about seeing the thing. This is how I felt about the like the movie back in the day.
so so is that just those things is the reason why you would like the movie version better than the OVA version?
I think that the movie version does a really good job of reshuffling things like from the OVA in a way that makes sense.
Mhm.
I think that the only really plot quibble I have with the movie is like at one point the YF-19 gets junked, but well it's like but you can just like imagine that, oh well, this just happened off screen, they can accept it, but
So
I
go on ahead.
oh no, like it just does a good job of like reshuffling things to the point, reshuffling things and adding all of its new additions. I feel are meaningful, and it shuffles around like the stuff from the OVAs without losing anything too significant. I mean, if you had told me that, no, this is just movie is just all there is, like I would have believed you. That's a
So
good job I think they did.
here's my interpretation of it. Um, I think that the OVAs are better. I just the movie has all of the stuff that you mentioned is excellent. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
The plots aren't affected. One of my biggest gripes about the movie, though, even after rewatching it, I'm kind of like this because it is a good execution. It's just a curt execution, and that's my biggest problem with it.
Hmm.
So it has it's like the theatrical cut rather than the director's cut. It's like somebody came in afterwards going like, you know what? I could trim all of this stuff out and then I can add these extra scenes in. And I like those scenes, don't get me wrong, but I just think that like it it robs the story a little bit and the narrative kind of falls a little bit short. So things don't line up as well. Let me give you at least one example. The general that is in charge of the program that put the ghost in charge is not even mentioned in the movie. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of an
Hmm.
interesting point because he is the one who junks it. You don't even know in the movie, if you're only watching the movie, you don't even know who this like why. It's just like, oh, they just went with this other thing. But he had an ulterior motive. And there was and it was, and that was the AI and this ghost program. Is it a major point? Not really. Does it make the story flow a little bit better? Yeah, it does. Just like the character arc for Isamu fits a little bit better when you give him his background. When you throw him in there, I felt that Isamu's character was not explained very well. Even if I just divorced all of that, what do you call it? Him fighting the rogue Zentratis and all that other stuff. One of the points that was brought up there, or his commander at that time, he's like, "I'm reassigning." Like you don't get any of that. But it is. I think it's a necessary part to understand his character. I think that kind of chops his character, like his character arc, a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and enough, and significantly enough, because if you're just watching the movie, you're kind of going like, okay, I'm supposed to believe that he's just this guy that is he's kind of a reckless pilot. So I also um with those scenes, the pacing feels a little stranger to me. Like it's just like in 30 minutes we're already, like, and granted they did cut about 30 minutes of footage, and maybe just a bit more was changed. Like there's a little that this one of the song scenes at the end is extended just a little bit. So I'm gonna say there's about 30 minutes of footage. Is it key? I think some of that actually is. So it feels a little choppy and the flow doesn't quite go. And that's kind of my general assessment of it. I think that they're both excellent executions. I just think one is a little bit choppy. I think the point comes across in both of them. Like you'll get it either way. Now I wish that my ultimate thing, like I said, it feels like a theatrical cut. And what's the best way to put this? Like you watch like Star Trek 2 in the theater, but you didn't watch like the director's cut. And the director's cut had all this extra stuff that, oh, they explained some of this, like what was going on. And I'm like, I kind of like that kind of stuff. So that's my opinion about it. So
Okay, quick question for you though.
mhm.
Do you think that our perspectives on this are different because I saw the movie first and you saw the OVAs first?
Possibly, but I don't think like I said, and that might have something to do with it, but I don't think that I can like, it's like I can I've done this before when I've watched movies. I'm like, let me take myself outside of the context that I understood, and let me just watch this kind of straight up. Let me kind of erase my mind and just shelve all of my anything that was defined before. What is the first scene we see with Isamu in it in the movie?
Oh, it's him like flying the YF-19.
There's a new test pilot, Gold. That's when we're first introduced to him. So it's sort of like, and then he meets him. But yeah, so it's kind of like, okay, well, we just kind of got thrown into who this guy is. And like, oh, okay, no background, no nothing. So like he's just a new test pilot. And like, and on the screen, this is the part where Gold's like, oh, it couldn't be him.
That's
Like
right.
he's just looking at the way
Hmm.
he's flying. He's like, it couldn't be him. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? So it's a bit of a mystery to me. It's like we haven't been introduced to him. Gold knows about him. We don't. So that would be so to answer your question, you can get to know him. It's also like, like they probably spend a little bit more time like building the Lucy thing is not really important, but it's there. It's like, okay, and it just builds on Isamu's character rather than Lucy. And Lucy's, like I said, it's just kind of like she's just like an NPC. Let's put it that way. She's just
Hmm.
there to enhance like Isamu. That's it. There's nothing much to her. Although, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think she's a cool character and stuff. She doesn't have a large role in this, right? So and so to answer your question, I think that it would serve it better if we had a little bit more buildup of that. I like the idea that that Isamu loved to take over the targets like of people. He's like, hey, he got in front of his firing and he kills his targets right there. And you see that same maneuver. He literally does that to Gold later on, where he flies right in front of the target. So it's kind of a callback to that scene. So yeah, I gave it a good chance, and I don't, like I said, I don't hate it. I'm just saying like it kind of it's a little too cut for me. I wish they had left in a lot of that footage. I would have watched a 3-hour movie. I wouldn't have cared. I don't care. I've seen longer movies, I think. So that's my opinion. Maybe one day, Shoji will get in his head like, I'm just going to make the ultimate director's cut of this thing and just make a gigantic movie out of it.
That'd be
So,
awesome.
I really
Yeah.
would love that, and
The
that
big-
would.
Like one big giant edition, definitive edition, combining all this stuff from the OVA, all the OVA footage, plus all the new stuff they did for the movie.
Yeah, I think because I do like the way that Gold. I mean, the way that Gold dies in the movie is just insane. I mean,
Hmm.
like you're absolutely correct. I was like, wow,
Spoilers
just
for a film you'll probably never get to see.
that's right. So I'm hoping that people look this up have already seen this. It's been out there for a while, so
Yeah,
yeah.
like Gold's death and like the end sequence, like the very end of the OVA, like those fell flat for me compared to
Yeah.
what the movie portrayed. And
Hmm.
and one thing that I loved about the OVA, what the OVA portrayed over the movie, is I think Jason mentioned it earlier, where they were doing that test flight where Isamu saved Gold, and Gold was thinking like, if only I apply pressure and smacked him into the ground. Well, in the movie, that landed him in the hospital, whereas in the OVA, you know, like Isamu had some minor scratches from that and walked away from it. What really put him in the hospital in the OVA was that fight sequence they had in that battlefield,
Hmm.
and so
Yep.
and
Now,
so I really liked that sequence more because that was like one of the big you know um uh, what's the robot mode called in Macross, like
Batloid.
Battleroid. That was like one of the main Battleroid modes in this series.
yeah. So there was another thing I had jotted a note down while I was writing notes when I was watching the movie as well, and it was just like when I'm talking about pacing. So there's the part where where they've both been retired, right?
Hmm.
Like in other words, they're like, "Hey, we're done." Da 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 da. I think Isamu essentially gets it and is like, "I'm gonna just destroy this damn ghost," right? So he goes down and he has in the OVA he has a problem getting the lock open to the hangar bay door because the shot you see just before it is the YF-19 covered in a big old cloth.
Hmm.
In the movie, it literally goes from that scene of it goes from the scene of the YF-19 being covered, and the next scene you see is Isamu walking in there, and what's his name's in the cockpit, and he's already
Right.
sitting. It's like
Hmm.
Hmm.
literally like 2 seconds later. And I'm like,
Hmm.
that's part of the that's like a pacing problem for me. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, you didn't explain that well. So the cut, that's an example of a cut problem that I had with that. Like I said, I would appreciate it if they like made this nice, like director's cut and just pulled it all together into one big movie. I watched a 3 hour movie of this.
Hmm.
So yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, again, it comes across fine. It's just pacing. That's part of the issues I have with the movie. It's like, okay,
Yeah. But
I
hey,
see
like
what you
they
did
do
there.
they do make this like giant like 3 hour version. Maybe they can find a way to make it so that Isamu like flying back to Earth doesn't seem like he's committing a giant terrorist attack against UN Spacey.
Right, because and that's another thing that's kind of odd, right? So we talked about that scene where Colonel Millard is talking with Lucy, right? And
Yeah.
I'm like, did you realize that he's just going back there to like literally destroy the other project? Did you know that? Because he didn't tell
To
you that.
destroy governmental property, and
Yeah, like
but
he's
he's
like,
also and then he also like go on. Sorry.
no. I mean, literally, he's like, yeah, I guess it's my turn. I don't remember exactly what he says. I'm like, so let's take Sharon out of the equation and everything else, and he's successful in destroying it. So you're going to tell the general, like, oh yeah, it's my fault. Like they'll court martial your ass. That's what I was thinking. So it's like, yeah, you're going to, yeah, like you said, like literally commit an act of terrorism against UN Spacey.
Yeah,
Like
and
you can't,
he
there's no way to sanction that.
well he actually does commit an act of terrorism because like he's blowing up all their like orbital defenses like before he gets to Earth. So
Yep.
it's kind of like, man, it's a good thing like they're at peace with the Zentradi and there are no other like alien races out to get us,
Oh
or else
yeah,
it's like this might have been a
absolutely.
problem.
Yeah. And Millard knows nothing about Sharon. Nothing. Like I'm like, okay. So to me, I'm like, I get the spirit of it, but you must have read the script, Colonel Millard, because yeah, there's the only way you would say something like that. So I think that's a slight plot oversight, but like I said, I
It's one.
appreciated the scene.
It's one of the reasons why it's like, yeah, if you think think too hard about like certain aspects of this plot, like it starts to fall apart. Because like in the next scene, like which is like this incredible fight between Isamu and Gold in a city, and well, it's like yeah, it's a city, and it's a city that appears to be completely uninhabited. I mean, just there's no. I mean, there's signs of people there. I mean, there's cars on the streets and
Mhm.
all, but there's like no signs of actual people there, which is good because Isamu and Gold kind of like they just kind of like ruin this place.
I
So
have
it's
tried ever since I saw this to wrap my head around that scene, and I still can't, even after watching the OVAs and the movies. And I know that we had talked about this before, Jason, but I
mhm.
still can't. It's like, I'm like, did they all go to the concert? And I'm looking like literally, I'm looking at the concert and I'm like, that stadium just ain't that damn big.
Well, it's
Like,
also like in a completely different part of the world because remember they're
right.
fighting. It's in like in the early evening, and then
Hmm.
when someone like has to leave the fight against the ghost and then fly over to a Nightfall, a part of the planet that's in Nightfall, to where the Macross is.
Hmm. And I just can't, I still can't. It's like, yeah, there's cars. I don't see a single soul around, but the implication is that there are people here, or there were either that, or, and this is my mind doing mental gymnastics to kind of make it fit. Like, oh, maybe this is like a range. I'm like, no, it can't be. This is a gigantic city. There is no way. This is not like the range that we saw earlier in the OVAs of the movie, whatever, right? Where they're hitting each other with paintballs essentially. This is not what
Hmm.
this is. This is huge. So anyway, yeah, I still, it's like one of those things. I'm like, okay, I'll just accept that there's not a soul here. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, it's like it's stuff like that that makes me go. It's like man, it's like I was able to fully accept this back in the day when I was a dumb kid. But now
Right.
it's like I now I'm thinking hard about this. Like, oh man, I can't unsee or like any of this stuff right here. It's always like in the front of my mind, at
Mhm.
least until we get to like the badass flight sequences at the very end.
Yeah. I've always even wondered about like the SDF one, like, after Sharon loses control. And I'm like, okay, it's coming down. Where is it going?
I assume it was
did
just
it
gonna
just
like fly
did it
back.
just soft land or what? Yeah, again, it's me like thinking about it. Like, okay, I can accept that Mung is not thrown about in here, and everyone else that's sitting in the SDF one, is being thrown about when they hit the ground or the water or whatever it is it's sitting in. I have no idea. I think it's water, but I can't tell. It's not clear.
I assume it was just like it was sitting in that pool at the beginning, and so it
Yeah.
just and then when she lifted she lifted it up, and then when she was gone, like it just fell right back down.
I mean, this is not some tiny ship. The displacement of water would cause like a mini tsunami, like to run over everyone else in this vicinity. But I'm not going to think about that. I'm not going to. I'm just like, okay, in science fiction they have those thing called inertial dampeners that's supposed to. Okay, that's why no one's flying around inside the ship. What about there? Oh, maybe again, I have to do mental gymnastics, but I don't care to explain it. I'm just like, it landed. That's all I care about.
Just accept the super mega happy ending.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. I'm like, get out of my way, critical thinking. You're ruining the fight scenes of the Valkyries in the air. I like that part. That's
yeah.
the fun part.
There
So
is no Endor apocalypse here.
yeah. Well, there's not pieces of the Death Star raining down on Ewoks. What? I don't know. Um,
but I think overall I did enjoy this more than Macross Zero. I mean, I did like Macross Zero, but um, as we mentioned before, and as you guys mentioned before, like I think this OVA, this film, was a pinnacle of Japanese animation in the 90s, like that, like one of those top tiered, like, oh, this is still a beautifully animated piece of artwork that still holds up to this day. And when it comes to like the Macross lore and designs, like this had some of the this had some of the most best designed Valkyries. Like I still like the YF-21 like in its plain form. Like I loved it as a Batroid. It was kind of weird but interesting design. But I really love the animation of this one. I love the storyline, and I think this is probably one of the better Macross projects that that I've seen.
I agree.
Yeah.
By the way, there is one thing that I did notice. That was a difference, and this is again a little minor thing, but I thought it was cool, and I was sad that I didn't see it in the movie. Is when Gold and Isamu are on that range and they're shooting each other with paintballs.
Hmm.
There's one point where I think Isamu lifts up a VF1.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Did you see
No,
that?
what I think Gold lifted it up like as a human
Oh yeah,
shield,
yeah.
as a human shield, and he Samu like shot at it.
Yeah, I was like, "Oh, look, check it out!" And I was looking for that scene when I watched the movie. It's like, "Oh, it's not there."
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah. There were some there, and that's what I liked about the OVA. I can't remember if this was in the movie, but yeah, there were those nods to the original series, like the the Skull Valkyrie as you mentioned, and then of course like when Myung was singing karaoke with her friends. My boyfriend is a pilot. One of Lin Minbei's most favorite songs.
Oh no, it was Kate who was singing. Cause like
Oh, it was Kate. Kate was singing. So yeah, I mean, I think that was a nice little nod to have in there. Aside from the SDF-1, but it really does tie in. I felt like this kind of tied more to the original series than um, Macross Zero did. Aside from Roy Fokker being in there.
well, I will tell you, having lived in that, I think I enjoyed this way better than Macross 2, which I
that's not a high
believe.
bar to clear, sir.
Yeah, it's not, but it came out before this, and it's like that was disappointing. So, I
Wait,
mean,
wait a minute. Plus came out before Macross
after
2?
afterwards.
After. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, yeah, to me, it felt redeeming when I watched it the first time.
Hmm.
And it's funny because my brother had showed it to me. Um, he was, by the way, he was one of the people who helped found the Greenwood Anime Club on
Hmm.
UCR.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah, they actually broke away from Video Burn back in the day, because of issues with the president that time. So,
What you mean? How the other co-founder was sleeping with the like president of Video Burn's girlfriend?
Yeah, so it's funny because
Love
he had
Triangle.
I had seen, yeah, there was another one. Yeah, I had my brother brought a videotape, and that's when I watched it the first time. But he also had the soundtrack, and he still has that soundtrack.
I've still got both CDs as
Awesome.
well.
Yeah, he was like, I was like, "What's that soundtrack?" He's like, "Oh, it's the soundtrack from Macross Plus." I'm like, "That's awesome." So yeah, I actually have it as well.
Yeah.
But
The only,
yeah,
the only disappointing thing about it is that it doesn't have the best song from the movie of the OVA, "Information High," which is the song that plays
yeah,
when Isamu was like is committing his terrorist act against against like the UN Spacey.
yep, exactly. Yeah, I did like that song. That was a really good song. Um, and but yeah, but like I said, it was like, oh man, redeemed. Like I said, Macross 2 was disappointing, and then we're like, cool, so they're going in the right direction again, and then Macross 7 comes along.
It's like, God damn it!
Just yeah, it's like hit miss, essentially in that order.
That's the pattern.
Yeah, and then hit. Yeah. Wow, it's almost like the Star Trek movie syndrome. You ever heard of that one?
Yep.
Was it the odd movies are the ones that are not great? The even ones are the great ones.
Yeah.
So
Well,
Star Trek 2, 4, and 6 are the good ones. 1, 3, and 5 are. um, but yeah, it's good stuff. I mean, again, yeah, you don't think about like, hey, where is the Daedalus and Prometheus? Not shut up. No one asked that question. That's what you saw in Do You Remember Love? I thought that it was destroyed. Shut up. No one's asking you that question. I thought the main gun was destroyed into you. I'm like, shut up. That's not. No one's asking you that question. Just watch it. It is entertaining, and that's what I would say is my final on that. It's worth watching. It's worth watching in either form. Quite frankly, if you have the ability to watch it, movie and the OVA, do it because it's worth it, in my opinion. And I think, by the way, I also think the dub's fairly decent. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's my kind of my final words on it. What about you guys?
I rewatched the dub before we did this, or the first episode anyway. And I gotta admit, it's like I think it's all right. It's certainly a lot better than you'd expect from a mid '90s anime dub. I mean, some of the guys are stiff, but Isamu's voice actor is quite good, and I think that's probably because he's got the most energetic role to work with, and well, it's also because he's the only person who in the cast who was voiced by a before they were famous actor. Because even though like he's credited as Lee Stone in the cast and on Anime News Network, like he's actually Bryan Cranston.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
and
Bryan Cranston is
oh, Walter White from Breaking Bad,
there.
like
You go.
among other things.
There you go.
Yeah, and also like for just like a bit of really obscure trivia, because I remember this is something my buddy David told me about the dub. I don't know how he knew this, but he's right. The guy who played Jan, the designer for the YF-19
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
in the English dub, he's voiced by the guy who did Roy Fokker in the Robotech dub.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's also worth noting that according to Anime News Network's like listening to the cast, they like the first three OVAs have the same cast. They were all main cast was replaced for whatever reason after episode 4, and interestingly enough, they went from Bryan Cranston to David Hayter as Isamu in that final episode. So
Isn't he David Hayter?
And David Hayter is famously known for playing our favorite super spy, who is Jason.
Snake.
Yeah.
Snake.
Yeah,
Right.
but yeah, it's like, I recommend you go check it out. Check it out as well. It's like I mean, I have my issues with it, but I think there's still a lot to recommend it, especially like the animation, the overall spectacle of it. And I think that the story, yeah, it's got some real issues, but I think you deserve a chance. Like everyone should have a chance to like make up their own mind on it. And
Yeah.
it's like there's enough like weirdness here, like that. There's gonna be like lots of different opinions that I'd like to know about.
I give it a pass on those potholes, if you will, or inconsistencies. I give it a pass. I'm like, it's still an entertaining story. How about you, Myron? You recommend this thing?
Oh, I definitely recommend it. Like as I said, one of the better Macross works that you can watch and feel like you haven't wasted your time with. And again, YF-19, one of my favorite Valkyries in this franchise, and unfortunately, I was looking up those DX Bandai figures, and unfortunately, the cost on the YF-19 is still way too high. But obviously, when you watch a piece of artwork or anime that you're really into, like at least for me, the merchandising bug starts to hit. So you kind of want to find, oh, I want a model kit, or find the Blu-ray set or something. Like you're just really jazzed about this particular franchise or work of art. So after watching this, I was just so in love with this this particular story. Like, man, I wish I could have a little bit more, whether it be a follow-up sequel eventually, like a game or something. I want more. I would love more to this, or just a new celebration of this. So what you guys mentioned earlier, like a super mega cut that would meld the best of both the OVAs and the films. Like I would love to see something like that someday. But overall, yeah, this is um, I would probably say this is my second favorite Macross story. After Do You Remember Love?
Mhm.
That'll always be my favorite. And even though I haven't watched the entire series like you guys have, like I remember watching bits and pieces of Frontier, and I like Frontier, but that's a series I need to delve deeper into again and get reacquainted with. But unfortunately, we're kind of starved for Macross content out here in the United States for obvious reasons. But you know, we'll find ways of supporting the brand and supporting the content we love so much.
Yeah, I look forward to reviewing Macross Frontier with you guys, but in a lot of ways, this plus Do You Remember Love and the TV series, those things, a lot of the things that you see in those three things feed into Frontier, and it's a good
Hmm.
thing. And this is the right order to do it in. So I would say, and we won't be able to cover the entire series of Macross Frontier in a single cast like this. We're gonna have to do like chunks. So I think though that it'll be fun to go through that. But and I'm eager to rewatch it because it's been a long time since I've rewatched Frontier. I'm struggling to get through Delta, but I'm having a hard time finding time for it, frankly.
Yeah,
But
freaking adulthood.
yeah, I mean, it's well, when there's a will, there's a way. Um, so it's like I can make the time for it. So I just haven't, you know, um, the story didn't draw me in as much as like Frontier did. But again,
Hmm.
there's a lot in Frontier that draws from its predecessors, and it's well played, and that's why it's good that we're doing it kind of in this order. So yep. So hey, I think that's what we got. And you'll catch us all again. We'll be on. And this is a little shorter than our usual casts, but we'll catch you next time, guys.
Definitely, you guys have a great one, and yeah, it was definitely a pleasure to discuss Macross Plus with you.
Yep. It's great revisiting it. See you later, guys.
Later.